Excellent. Hello and welcome again to the 2021 Better Buildings, Better Plants Summit. We're so glad to have you here with us this afternoon. Today we will be discussing one of the most relevant topics for this last year, which is integrating health and efficiency through the many challenges of the pandemic throughout the last year plus. So you are about to join the session for Health Efficiency in Building Operations, Insights from the Pandemic, and a Look Ahead. Before we get started, there are a couple of housekeeping items I'd like to cover. The first is that this session will be recorded and archived on the Better Buildings Solutions Center. So after this, you'll be able to access this recording and click on any links that we share today. Additionally, you've probably noticed that you've joined in listen-only mode, which means that you're not able to unmute yourself. However, we'll still have plenty of opportunities for you to engage with us using a tool I'll talk about in a moment. And if you have any audio or visual issues or other tech issues we can help with, you can go ahead and put that into the Zoom chat, and we'll be able to respond there with our tech support in the Zoom chat. Next slide, please. I'm your moderator, Hannah Debelius, and I'm a fellow in the Building Technologies Office at the Department of Energy, and I have the privilege of working with the Better Buildings program with our commercial real estate and higher education sectors, along with a couple of other Better Buildings hats. Today, we are going to be starting off with some brief introductions and getting some polls going for our audience to see who we've got in the line with us. Then we've got three wonderful presentations from speakers across commercial real estate sectors. Then we're going to spend the bulk of our time together doing some moderated discussion and then taking questions from the audience to engage all of our speakers on this topic of health and efficiency in the built environment. So this is how you're going to interact with us. Today we are using a tool called Slido. So you can either go to your mobile device or open up another browser and go to slido.com. Then you're going to enter the event code, DOE, and from a dropdown, you're then going to choose the name of our session, which again is Health Efficiency in Building Operations. So the best way to interact with us, again, is right now, open up either another browser window or your mobile device and go to slido.com. The event code is DOE. You might need to then click a little button that says join, and you'll choose our session from the dropdown, which is Health Efficiency in Building Operations. We've also just dropped a link into the Zoom chat, so you can click there as well for a little shortcut. Hopefully you all are getting set up for that now, because we are going to switch over now to our first poll. This is just to get a little bit more information about who we've got on the line with us today. We can go ahead and launch that poll. The first question should be an easy one for you all. And that question is just, what sector do you represent? All right, so a lot of nonprofits on the line with us, contractors, commercial real estate, government and state and local, higher education, multifamily. Can we scroll down? I'm curious to see if we've got other hospitality partners on the line with us. Some K-12 and financial services, industrial manufacturing. All right, excellent. Well, I'm glad to see this Slido should be working for many of you. So with that, thanks so much. And we're going to be moving on to our next poll, please. And then this is a little bit more in depth here, which is that we are asking you to rate from 1 to 5, with 1 being not very important and 5 being very important, how important health and wellness is to your building portfolio or organization. All right, so far we have about half people saying that it is very important. So again, that scale is 5 is very important and 1 is least so. All right, and about a third of people have it at a 4. Excellent, and it's definitely, of course, what we've been seeing, especially over the last year of this switch to a real emphasis on health and wellness through the pandemic, and I think looking ahead as well. All right, thanks. We have just one more poll for you before we get into our panelists, so we can go ahead and launch that. This is going to be an open word poll, so you can just write 1 to 2 words in there. But if you could please share what projects or themes you think of when exploring health and wellness related to the built environment. It could be something you're working on or something you're thinking about. Green roofs. Yeah, I definitely worked in an office with a nice green roof that you could walk on, which was certainly good for wellness. Indoor air quality, a lot about air quality and indoor air quality, thick building. HVAC and filters, definitely something that has been talked about a lot over the last year. Yeah, maintenance, IEQ, filter changes, air purification. Excellent. Well, I think a lot of these themes are definitely things we're going to be talking about in today's session. And a lot on indoor air quality. Excellent. Well, I think we can go ahead and close that poll and switch back over to our slides. Thank you all so much for answering those polls on Slido. And you should go ahead and keep Slido open because that's also where we're going to be accepting questions. You can submit questions anytime during the session for our panelists, and we'll be able to answer those at the last part of our session today. Also, if you see another person's question that you like, you can go ahead and hit that thumbs up icon. And the more votes that something has, it moves it to the top of the list so we can prioritize that in Q&A. And also just one more housekeeping reminder, if you have any tech issues, you can put that in the Zoom chat function. We'll be able to handle it. So thank you so much again to all of our panelists for joining us. I'm excited to jump in here. So actually we can go one more slide because I'm going to go ahead and introduce our first speaker, which will be Jonathan Bauer. Jonathan Bauer is with the Tower Companies, and as the Tower Companies Sustainability Manager, Jonathan leads initiatives to meet aggressive sustainability goals across Tower's portfolio. He manages the company's energy, water, and waste programs, green building certifications, and health and wellness strategies, and engages tenants and Tower staff to promote sustainability best practices. So Jonathan, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you so much, Hannah. Can you hear me? All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming. I just have to say I'm super excited to be here. I don't know about all of you, but this has been an absolutely electric Better Building Summit, starting with a great kickoff day, and I've just been excited throughout the week. So thanks for joining. And obviously a huge thanks to Hannah and Andrea, the entire DOE Better Buildings Challenge team for putting all of this together. I know it's a lot of hard work and you've done another excellent job in this virtual format. So thank you. Also, just want to add, I'm very humbled to be alongside Sarah and Rishi today. Looking forward to hear what they have to say in the conversation. So with that, go to my next slide, please. Before I dive in too deep, I just want to give a very quick overview of the Tower Companies. We are a family-owned and privately held commercial real estate company based in the Washington, D.C. area, and we definitely pride ourselves on sustainability, excellence, and leadership. It's been a focus for the company for over 25 years now, back to the mid-1990s when we really got going on this. I'm not going to read all the stats on this slide. You can do that in your own time. But essentially, we're about 6 million square feet of commercial office, multifamily residential, and retail properties. The other thing I just want to note really quickly is we're a developer, owner, and manager. So that means that we're involved from the design and construction process all the way through to long-term hold of the building. So we build our buildings and we hold them long-term. So we're very interested and focused on operations long-term in a building, and we're involved in the full life cycle, which allows us to do some pretty fun and pretty aggressive things with sustainability and health. Next slide, please. Like I said, we're based in the Washington, D.C. area. Not much here other than a couple snapshots of some of our properties. Next slide, please. Folks probably recognize a lot of these, so I won't go through them too much either, but we like to standardize a lot of our approach, and this is some of the foundation of the program we've built. So 98% of our properties are LEED certified, all platinum and gold, and all recertified in 2020, so up to date. Over 80% are Energy Star certified, with most of the buildings in the top 10% in the country. And then over half of our properties at this point are Fitwel certified, and I'm working on a couple others now. And then, of course, the Better Buildings Challenge, we've been a participant since, I believe, 2013. We hit both of our 20% energy and water reduction goals ahead of that 2020 target, and working on the next 20% now. Next slide, please. All right, so before I dive in, I just want to give a little history of wellness and as it relates to Tower and how we think about this. And this panel is so interesting because it's about the intersect of efficiency and health, and that's obviously very relevant in the new world we are living in. But most of these concepts that we talk about now aren't very new. Some are, but most are not. This is something that Tower has been, thinking about for well over a decade at this point. In this case study you see here, we partnered with Harvard Business School back in 2008 to produce this piece. all about our headquarters building in Rockville, Maryland, which was built at the time, and it was designed with health at the core. How could a well-balanced building, one with daylight, perfect orientation, surrounded by greenery, with a state-of-the-art filtration system, how could all of those things impact people? We were asking that question then. It was really our first foray into this topic. And people reacted. You can see the quote here from one of our staff when they moved into the building. And so the picture you see below is one of our partners, Jeffrey Abramson, presenting this at Harvard Business School in 2010. The rest is really history. We started taking a lot of these concepts and things we learned from that building and incorporating them across our portfolio and our existing buildings. Next slide, please. But that said, there is this balancing act that we all are working with on a daily basis in our buildings. We learned a lot along the way, and we've known about this issue for a long time. And there are some times where, the scale tips in one direction or the other. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that in every single scenario, 100% of the time, we can have equilibrium of health and energy efficiency. Sometimes it does tip certain ways, like with the pandemic. A lot of buildings in the US and across the world tipped a little bit more towards healthy buildings and had to, give a little bit on energy efficiency here and there. But what I do want to say is there is way to find balance. And the dream scenario for building engineers and operators is to find that balance, especially in this new world. So how do we do that? I'm going to talk a little bit about it, but essentially we need good data, we need new data, we need dedicated people, and then we need smart technologies that can help us get there. It can be done, but we cannot do it the same way before the pandemic. We are now operating in a new and different world. So we have to apply what we've learned over the last year plus to make this a reality. Next slide, please. So here's a real example that I want to dive into very quickly. I could talk about this for hours, so I'm going to go brief. Here's a real example at one of our properties, 1828 L Street in Washington, D.C. What you're looking at here is a snapshot of some data from Prescriptive Data, which is a company that runs Nantum operating system, a smart building technology we have piloted in this building. We did that in collaboration, not just with Prescriptive, but also the Department of Energy and Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory, who is doing rigorous M&V, and we'll release that to the public sometime in 2022 probably, so you can read more then. Essentially, high level, we're expecting 10% energy savings with this system and about $50,000 a year, and that's in a building that's already very efficient and Energy Star score in the high 80s. So what does this system do? Essentially, this system loves data. So we have thousands of BMS data points that are flowing into this system on a daily basis, as well as occupancy sensors on every floor in each unique air handling zone, energy interval data, IAQ sensor data. And for us right now, that's just the tip of the iceberg. The beauty is there's more we can add and layer in as we learn and go. So what are you looking at on this slide exactly here? These are the fan speeds of every single air handling unit in the building. So this building has lease hours of 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. So in the before photo, you can see we were starting those systems all around 6 a.m. with a tiny bit of staggering, which was pretty standard BMS functionality. So what we have done and changed drastically is a start smart up sequence using Nantum's smart system. And how does that work? So literally as I speak right now, Nantum is starting to scan the building. It's looking for operational conditions tomorrow. It's looking at what is the temperature and conditions going to be outside in our localized area tomorrow? What are the internal space temperatures? What is the historical functionality of each air handling unit given those conditions in the past? And using machine learning and AI, it can then predict what it will be in that condition tomorrow. The system then rescans the same thing the next day, confirms those values, spits out a schedule of exactly to the minute when each air handling unit should start to deliver the exact same comfort and temperature by 8 a.m. the lease hours. So that's essentially what you see in the after picture there. Quite a bit different. What we're seeing very consistently over the last 6+ months is most of our units now don't need to start until 7:15, 7:20, and some even later than that to deliver the exact same comfort. So again, the beauty of this is that it's fluid. As our operations change, as tenants change, as weather conditions change, Nantum learns, it remembers, and it responds with really high precision and automates this function in our building. So there's a lot of energy savings here, but let me just touch on the health aspect because I wish I could talk a lot more about it. But this sounds like energy efficiency a lot, right? But when you think back to the seesaw, what we're implementing here is energy efficiency without sacrificing health. We are still having the same conditions. We control all of these inputs. And we have the data to confirm that these parameters are meeting industry standards. We can look at temperature, humidity, carbon dioxide, any other IAQ metric to make sure everything is in perfect balance. And we're really starting to learn how to use all these data points, roll them into the technology, and maximize it as much as possible. Next slide, please. So with that, I just want to talk really quickly about COVID-19, our response, and a little bit of our outlook. Like many of our peers, we spent the last year thinking a lot about this issue, being really ingrained and involved, thinking about health, how it fits into our overall sustainability agenda. And this is not new, right? We've been thinking about health like this for 3 to 5 years across our industry, but now it's the number one thing, and it's changed a little bit, focused on, respiratory disease, of course. But it's accelerating so much good work. And I've been involved in our COVID task force really from day one and have learned quite a bit. And there was quite a learning curve as we went through this. So here's how I like to break down and make an analogy to COVID. And I think this works for kind of energy efficiency and building sustainability too. Our general COVID response is much like a symphony. What do I mean by that? A symphony needs a full set. Right? Every instrument in a symphony needs to play its part. You need sheet music and you need a conductor that lays the foundation of the symphony. That might be something like building management policies to set standards or communication protocols to your clients. You need the fundamentals to keep the pace, to set the tone. Maybe that's percussion or bass strings in a symphony. In a building, that might be ventilation or filtration. Then you want to layer in brass and woodwinds, things that add more power, more movement. In a building, that might be UV in your air handling systems or bipolar ionization or any other technology out there. Last but not least, you need the violins and the flutes, the things that are the flashy and noticeable instruments. So, that could be something like having FAR UVC in your actual building spaces, or it could be having a Fitwel viral response certification that's public facing. Bottom line is the symphony will not perform well if some of these elements are missing. It's the same way in a building. This needs to be a layered approach to really provide a healthy building and a healthy environment. We cannot just do some of these things. We need to consider all of them and be holistic. So very, very briefly, I'm going to walk through what you see on the slide here. The first picture is a good example at 1707 L Street in DC. Pictures of our signage communicating what we're doing with our tenants, obviously hand sanitizer and signage to help navigate the building. Top middle is 1828 L Street in DC. These are MERV 15 filters, which we've upgraded to across our entire commercial office portfolio. Next to that is an air handling unit system with UV installed. We have also done that across our entire portfolio. Bottom left is an elevator with a UV light bar in the back of the top you can see. That sanitizes the air and the surfaces in the elevator. Bottom middle, there's a fan in the back there with a HEPA filter on the wall. There's also UV lights in the ceiling that are a little bit tricky to see, but they're there, also filtering the air. And the last one is a little bit of an interesting experiment. It's actually a UV portal. It's placed in a fitness center. But essentially what it is, when you walk into a building or leave, you can walk through that for about 20 seconds and sanitize anything on your person when you leave the building, should you choose to do so. So those are some of the initiatives. Last slide, please, I think here. And lastly, I just want to touch a little more on Fitwel. Did an awesome job launching this program after the pandemic, really took hold. We've completed the Fitwel viral response module across our entire managed portfolio. And then a handful of our buildings in the DC region were the first globally to do so. This is a program that consulted dozens of health experts and real estate practitioners, coming up with 21 unique strategies that are specific to mitigating viral transmission in buildings. And this is so important because this is like the concert hall of our symphony, right? It can't just be Tower going out in the world and saying, here's the things we're doing. We need to align with professionals in the health industry and others who have studied this and verified this, that we have actually done the things we're saying we're doing, that our policies meet a standard, that we're providing the healthiest building possible, especially given the conditions we live in today. And what I'll just leave you with is every building's different. Every building has a unique approach, but at large, the technology and the policies are out there right now to create healthy and sustainable buildings for the future. It's the call and the need of the time, and we need to elevate to this new expectation. And that's really our goal. Our goal is to manage our buildings just like a symphony. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Hannah.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Jonathan. And I like your call to action at the end. It's also hard to believe that Jonathan, you joined us for the closing plenary of Better Buildings Summit last year to talk about a similar topic, and you to see what Tower's done since then. Excellent. Next up, we have Rishi Shah. He is the Director of Sustainability for Wyndham Hotels and Resorts. Before this role, Rishi ran his own consulting firm where he assisted hotels and other commercial properties with the development and implementation of energy strategies and operational best practices. So thanks so much, and Rishi, take it away.
Thanks so much, Hannah. A pleasure to be here with you, Jonathan, and Sarah. Can you hear me all right? I'll take that as a yes. Next slide, please. I'd like to give you a little overview about Wyndham Hotels and Resorts. Unlike Jonathan, Wyndham and Tower Corporation, Wyndham Hotels and Resorts is an asset-light organization. We actually only own 2 hotels, the Wyndham Grand Bonnet Creek in Orlando and the Wyndham Grand Rio Mar in Puerto Rico. While we third-party manage about 300 hotels globally on behalf of other hotel owners, and the remainder of our approximately 8,900 hotels globally are franchised under one of our 20 iconic brands, such as Wyndham, La Quinta, Days Inn, or Ramada Inn. So these are properties that operate in accordance to our brand standards, but on their own operating procedures and best practices. So we can only influence them and guide them. Next slide, please. So now, where do sustainability and health fit in our strategy? Every day we work to empower new experiences for travelers in a way that positively impacts the world around us. That's why we're really committed to social responsibility efforts. And we're really focused on 4 key themes that are the centerpiece to our strategic approach to ESG principles in our business. Our commitment comes to life with these 4 pillars. We embrace different perspectives in our inclusive, fun workplaces and hotels where everyone has a genuine opportunity to succeed. We are committed to the health and safety and well-being of our team members and guests. We care for the communities in which we work and we live, and we are accountable for our part in protecting the environment. It's these 4 pillars and our Count on Me service that really guided us during the pandemic in order to better serve our guests, team members, and franchisees. Next slide, please. So now for us, we've implemented the Wyndham Green program to demonstrate our commitment to protecting the environment in which we live, work, and enjoy. As part of our strategic vision for fostering a values-driven culture, we realize that it's essential to protect our natural capital and resources in order to deliver long-term sustainable value to our stakeholders and our franchisees. Our main focus areas are as follows. We want to minimize our impact on the climate change by reducing our emissions and environmental impact. We want to become energy efficient and increase the usage of renewable energy where feasible. We also want to increase water conservation efforts and identify risks and opportunities because water is one of our scarcest resources. And we also want to increase our waste diversion efforts by better understanding the waste profiles at our hotels. Next slide, please. We continue to promote our Wyndham Green program, which was really designed to show hotels how they can reduce their operating costs through efficiency, help drive revenue from environmentally conscious travelers, remain competitive in the marketplace, and increase their brand loyalty. We're working to fully integrate the Wyndham Green program throughout our value chain by engaging and educating executive and brand leaders, team members, design and construction partners, our franchisees, and suppliers as well. Now, our Green program consists of 2 main elements, the Wyndham Green Toolbox and the Wyndham Green Certification. Together, these are the 2 components that really allow us to measure our impact while aiming for continuous improvement across our Wyndham branded properties. The Wyndham Green Toolbox is our online environmental management system that was designed to track, measure, and report on energy emissions, water, and waste performance globally. Now, our branded properties all have access to this and have the ability to measure and track the impacts of their efficiency projects that they implement. And we can monitor and benchmark their progress, allowing them to reduce operating costs while also reducing our collective impact on the environment. And our certification program is our own internal certification program, which is comprised of 5 progressive levels, which have anywhere from 5 to 7 best practices per level that address energy and water conservation, waste diversion, operational efficiency, as well as guest, team member, and franchisee education and engagement. The first 3 levels of the program really prioritize quick payback efficiency measures, some of which are no cost and low cost. Next slide, please. Now, the past 14 months have certainly been a challenging time for us for all of us, especially for us in the travel and tourism industry. Now, our responsibility as a company, now more than ever, is to help ensure the future remains bright for travelers around the world, starting with our guests, team members, and franchisees. Now, our teams deliver great experiences, and we have to keep our teams motivated, supported, and appreciated, which means being adaptive and nimble during the pandemic. We've taken a variety of measures, including flexible work schedules, as home and work lives blur together for our corporate team members, as well as extending Summer Friday office hours. For hotel team members on the front lines, we've created new ways to celebrate their work, like superhero-themed appreciation weeks, which have gone a long way. We quickly launched the Count on Us initiative, which is a new long-term, multifaceted initiative to really help build confidence among our guests and to support franchisees to welcome back travelers safely to their hotels. And this is in alignment with our industry's AHLA Stay Safe initiative, or Safe Stay initiative, I'm sorry. Now, with health and safety at the top of mind for guests, we built in safety messaging and visual cues throughout the customer experience. Like if there's mask guidelines, hospital-grade disinfectants for public areas and guest rooms, hand sanitizing stations, and social distancing signage. In addition, our teams quickly worked to update our mobile app in order to prioritize low-contact in-stay features, and also as one of the first to offer mobile check-in and check-out at nearly 6,000 economy and mid-scale hotels throughout the United States. And this couldn't have come at a critical time, as both travelers and hoteliers looked for innovative solutions to help navigate the challenges of the coronavirus pandemic. Key among some of those features are mobile check-in, check-out, digital room key, and then in-stay interaction with the hotels. Next slide, please. Now, our response to COVID-19, driven by our Count on Me culture, also intersects with our commitment to reducing our environmental impact. To minimize contact during stays, housekeeping services were kept to a minimum unless otherwise requested or required by local law or ordinance, which also helped to conserve both energy and water through the reuse of linen and terry and cleaning during stays. Now, the Wyndham Green program also offered hotels best practices around energy and water conservation, waste diversion, and operational efficiency. But we also quickly rolled out tips to our hotels to help reduce utility costs and consumption during these periods of lower occupancy without compromising that guest experience or the property's physical health and systems. And with fewer guests to plan around, which means renovations and energy efficiency projects could be accelerated where feasible. Those hotels that could do so were encouraged to take this moment of lower occupancy as an opportunity to expedite some of those previously planned renovations and other projects. We recommended to owners that they not only focus on those areas that could help impact and enhance the guest experience, but also help deliver long-term savings, such as energy efficiency projects like lighting retrofits and energy management systems and water efficiency. And it was our job to make them aware of those best practices so that they can make the best decisions possible. Thank you very much, Hannah. Back to you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Rishi. All right. Next up, we have Sarah Neff. Sarah Neff is the Senior Vice President for Sustainability at Kilroy Realty Corporation. At Kilroy, she oversees all sustainability initiatives, including solar and battery deal making, energy and water efficiency, the award-winning green leasing program, and more. So Sarah, take it away.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everybody. I'm so excited to be here. And I'm assuming everybody can see me and hear me. Let me know if that's not the case. All right, so I'll just take I'll take 1 second on Kilroy. So Kilroy Realty is a publicly traded real estate investment trust. It is active on the West Coast of the United States. We have about 14 million square feet of mostly office and life science, a little bit of multifamily and retail in there as well. So that's us. Next slide. So much as you heard in Jonathan and Rishi's talk, I'm so excited to be here with them, and thanks so much to DOE for having me. I'm going to talk a little bit about where we were on health, and then where we're going, where we are, and then where we're going. So I'm just going to time myself to make sure that I don't go over my time. Very good. All right, next slide. So this is where we were. Kilroy's health programs launched in about 2015, and in about 2017, and so we were doing well. We were sort of figuring out air quality testing and whatnot. And then my daughter started coughing herself to sleep every single night. And for those of you who are parents, it's a horrible feeling when you can't figure out what's wrong with your kid and help them feel better. Nothing was really working on her. She got put on this horrible thing, and that wasn't working. And then they put steroids in it. That one wasn't working. And it took 6 months for her to get diagnosed with asthma. And that was the first time I was like, oh my goodness, I wonder if it's the air in our house. I live in LA and not too far, though I can't hear it from a busy freeway. Figured out that was the problem, put in an air filter, and problem was solved. Sounds like a great story, except it's not, because we had already had health programs. This is sort of how little we were all connecting, excuse me, health and the environment. Was, even though I did this for a living, I wasn't getting it. So it was early days, about 5-6 years ago. Now we're a lot better. Next. But right around that time was when a lot of research started coming out. You've heard Jonathan mention the Harvard, out of Joe Allen's lab there, about the impact of health and air quality on cognitive function. That research was coming out right around then. Stoke, who's a great sustainability consultant we work with a lot out of California, they were really helping to sort of connect that to the financial case. And so, we were starting to understand health. We were seeing maybe the impacts in our own lives. Research was coming out. Things were really improving. Next. And so this is how Kilroy had been doing health. So we have health means sort of two things at Kilroy, or had meant before COVID, two things currently. The first was active design. Active design is anything that helps folks be more physically active in their spaces. That's everything from connectivity to transit to making it easier to bike. Like in this picture, we have people working outside, a connection to the outdoors, biophilia. We have making sure there's connectivity to public transit from where we're locating our buildings. So a major piece of health at Kilroy up until now has been active design. Next. The other thing is air quality monitoring. So this is not a very sexy slide, but this is what my life looks like a lot. We go into our buildings, we test the air. We want to make sure we don't have CO2 above 550 parts per million. This is actually taken in my own headquarters, and you can see we almost have it, except almost everywhere in the space. We have a couple spaces that are in the high, a little above 550, but everywhere else is looking really, really good. So we'd want an air quality report to look like, and this is really sort of active design and air quality have been like the two major things that we had really focused on prior to 2020. Next slide. These are some other areas. So this is sort of what health and wellness overall looks like at Kilroy. You can see everything here is usually either an air quality item or an active design item. So on the air quality side, you'll see MERV filters, you'll see the testing I talked about, you'll see low emitting materials, that kind of thing. On the active design, we're talking about things like roof gardens. I saw somebody mention that earlier. Making sure people had break areas, so you don't have to eat lunch at your desk, fitness areas, active stairwells, all that. So this is basically the picture of what health looked like at Kilroy. We were very proud that the Center for Active Design had given us its Best in Building Health Award 3 years straight. We'd also gotten some kudos for having some early well projects as well. So things have been going well. Next slide. And we were really happy to partner with Joe Allen's lab for their third study on the connection between cognitive function and health in the environment. So I was one of the lab rats. This is where my Fitbit comes from. This is my desk, and we all 10 of us signed up at Kilroy. We got air quality monitors at our desks. We got our Fitbits, sending all of that data about our physical activity and how the air was, and also our cognitive function, because we were constantly taking little quizzes on our phones, and all that data was really helping the Harvard folks understand even better sort of how this all plays out in real life. So prior to COVID, prior to 2020, we'd made a lot of strides. We were understanding health. We were implementing it in terms of air quality, active design, everything kind of flowed into that, and we were helping further research on the impacts of health in the built environment. Next slide. But we did have this problem where we had this tension that you've been hearing about between energy and health. And what do we mean by that? Really, it comes down to the fact that often, if you want your air quality to be better, you kind of got to run your building mechanical system, or you got to get more fresh air through the building. Inside air is often twice as bad as outside air, but when you run air through a building, it takes energy to do that. It takes money to do that. And so there was really a tension between health and energy efficiency. And it was pretty hard to navigate that tension in all of our projects. Next. Give them my time. Good. All right, so that's building health where we were. Now let's talk about where we are. Next. Great. So now all of a sudden COVID is happening, and all of a sudden now we're having to think about tenant health and safety and making all that make sense. Next slide. So this is really when we had to like get real on it and figure out how to make energy efficiency and health work. There was this major focus, obviously, on health. It changed everything kind of about what we did. It was one of these things where I think a lot of folks in my job thought COVID hit and, oh my goodness, are we still going to have jobs? And then we found out, no, actually, we were in charge of the COVID response. It was an interesting year, and here's what we did. So next. So this is what it looks like. We wanted our environments to be safe and healthy. A lot of things went into that. You'll see here air filtration, the UV cleaning that you were hearing about from Jonathan, a lot of sanitation stations, whatnot, but outdoor air exchanges, which were, again, making things pretty hard from an energy efficiency standpoint. Next. But we did have some wins. So one of the things that in active design that had been really important was having open stairwells. This is something that had made many people very grumpy for security reasons at Kilroy, because you have to pay for all the extra key card screening stuff to be able to get people on the right floor and not where they're not supposed to be. Open stairs were a great response during COVID because they reduced congestion at the elevator, but then we're running the elevator less and there's energy savings there. Next. And then some other things are sort of happening, which are changing our energy usage during COVID. A major thing is density management. Obviously, as you guys know, there's not everybody's in the space all the time anymore. And how are we? So we started trying to figure out how to modulate our air for the folks that were there. Especially because we knew that there was going to be sort of increased space requirements, and it became very, very clear that we were going to have to get a lot smarter about how we were ventilating our buildings. Next. And now, in my last couple of minutes, because I'm right on time, I'm going to talk about what's next. So next slide. Right. So here's some things that are happening that have been working really well. One of the things we found during COVID is this was a new construction, but there are fans now that were able to help us increase our fan speed while saving on energy. So it was really exciting. We had some new technologies come out for a building that we were building in San Diego, where the original fan that had inspect, there was a need for more outside air, which was making me very nervous about the energy model. And then we went to the market and found out that no, in fact, fan technology has improved to the point where we were able to find a fan that had more outside air and still saved us on energy. So that was a win-win. Next. And then this is sort of where we're going. So as I was mentioned, COVID has really helped us understand the importance of modulating the air to the people who are there. You can see that the party office on the left of your screen is going to need a lot more air than the office on the right of your screen, which is what my office often looks like. And so where we are is we're starting to pilot the idea of modulating the amount of air in a per office and a per suite area for the amount of occupancy. So you heard earlier about the importance of sort of AI and artificial intelligence, learning about this. So basically what we're doing is we're trending occupancy currently we're piloting it in private offices within Kilroy's own footprint in our own management offices. The system is gonna learn about who is coming in and out and when they're usually there. So after that trending period, we're then installing sort of a retrofit of a damper into the ductwork. And then we're gonna be modulating down airflow when the system predicts that nobody will be there. And then if somebody does show up, it'll learn that behavior and then change. The idea is we don't want people to be uncomfortable in their space. We also don't want to be ventilating spaces that are empty. And so we're all really needing to get a lot smarter about how to make that work going forward. And next. And this is where we sort of really hope it's going. So we've had energy efficiency and health really fighting before. We're now finally seeing opportunities for energy efficiency and health to have co-benefits together, where we have better tenant comfort or better health, for example, through a more efficient fan that's blowing even more outside air through, but yet is reducing energy, through making sure that we're modulating so that we're not overventilating where we don't need to. So this is where health is going. We are now aware of health. We're now aware of sort of the pieces in terms of active design and air quality. And now we're finally seeing the technology show up into the market that are helping us really come up with great outcomes for both. So with that, I will turn it back to Hannah.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sarah and Rishi and Jonathan, for your insights. We're going to move over to a moderated discussion here where I've got some questions. So perfect. Yeah, if you all could bring your video back up. Wonderful. So you all, touched on a couple of different tools. Jonathan, you talked about smart buildings. Sarah, even, the technology that you just mentioned about the fan. But my question is, what tools are you utilizing to help realize the co-benefits of energy efficiency and health? Or what are the most important tools? And maybe, Sarah, I'll start with you for that question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. So we still, much like you heard previously in the presentation, we really rely on folks like the Center for Active Design to sort of help us understand what health looks like. They were a major and just fantastic partner through COVID, so we can understand that. So they have been able to publish sort of a series of sort of toolkits and frameworks, and that's been really, really helpful for us. We still rely on third-party air quality testing. So what we did was during the pandemic, Underwriters Laboratory had a pandemic response module, and they came in and did on-site air, water, and germ testing for us. And so having that as like an off-the-shelf module that was ready to go when COVID hit was really, really helpful. So yeah, a lot of third-party tools have really been helping us as we navigate the new reality.
Yeah, that makes sense. And for third-party tools or certifications, that does remind me about the Jonathan, you brought up your Fitwel certification for, which I know you all have partnered with Fitwel in the past, but the viral response certification. And Jonathan, I am curious a little bit more about if you're using that as a tool, how you chose it, or how you're utilizing it.
Yeah, I think the big thing like early on that was really important is like we all wanted someone to tell us what to do, right? Like there's so much flying at you, like tech and ideas and all these things, like what's real, what's not. And so when, Well and Fitwel, I think both launched their programs around the same time, I think we all kind of jumped at the opportunity to look at that research and let them be the experts and tell us what works in buildings. And, I think it was critical in taking a huge, massive information and boiling it down to the things that mattered the most. And we're using it, to help communicate what we've done. It's like the umbrella of all these things that we're doing. It kind of touches everything from communication to actual building policies and more. So we're definitely using it as a communication tool and to show a level of confidence that we haven't just said we're doing all these things, right? But here's the backup and the process and the validation. I can't say enough about the third party piece just being so important to validate all this stuff.
It makes sense. And Jonathan, I think it was maybe 8 months ago, you and I were having a conversation, and just that week on NPR, I had heard NPR talk about MERV 13 filters. And I just thought, wow, just the evening news talking about HVAC filters, like this is wild. And, all of our building operators must be getting so many calls and questions and wondering what to do in a totally new way than it was before. Rishi, do you have any other tools that you'd like to add or tools that you use for co-benefits of energy and health?
No specific tools, because part of the challenge for us is with our franchisees, every building is so different with different technologies, different footprints. So it's hard to find a one size fits all. Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. So the next question I want to ask is, related, but a little on the flip side of that, which is, I am curious, what is one technology or tool that you wish existed on this topic of health and buildings? It could be fathomable or completely unfathomable, but I'm curious. You could wave your magic wand.
Yeah, for me, it's an air filter, but that magically requires less power to push the air through it rather than more, but somehow cleans the air the same or better on the way through. I would love something like that. There's a product pitched to me like that a long time ago, and that company went belly up, so I don't think it actually worked. But to me, that would be magical. And then in general, something that's not invasive, but that helps us. I think we've picked a couple of good technologies to pilot, but the less invasive technologies that enable, again, us to really understand who, from a privacy protective way, who is in the space, and then modulate the air as a result of that. Because right now, everything still involves, cutting into the ductwork, and, it's or a control sequence on top of existing piles of control sequences. So it's a little bit tricky right now. So it would be nice if there was some magical way to help us easily understand density and react.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Rishi. We're going to jump in, or was it Hannah?
It was me, but go for it, Jonathan.
Okay, I'm not going to steal Sarah's idea because I think that's awesome. I hadn't honestly really given it much thought, and I think it's a really good point because you see the backside. All right, everyone's going to upgrade to MERV 13, MERV 15, maybe higher if they can, and then what? Right, like maybe your systems can handle it, but you're definitely using more energy, and then those systems catch so much stuff, so much particulate, you got to change them and they're expensive. So long term, you have to think about like the mechanics of all these decisions. It's really easy short term to be like MERV 15, MERV whatever, right? But down the line, it's harder. So our teams are like, can we add pre-filters that don't get as much of the particulate on the 15 so they last longer, so we can have more efficient. So there's a lot of different things now we're thinking about. But my idea for what I want, and I think there's a lot out there, people who claim they have this, but I don't think it's quite there yet, is I want a bulletproof indoor air quality index. I don't think we quite have it. I think there's a lot of companies with sensors who are trying to do this, who are attaching scores. I think some of them are pretty good, but I don't think it's quite there in the sense that it only takes into account a couple metrics. And I really want like the full spectrum, because part of the problem is when you're looking at 15 different indoor air quality metrics, how do we boil that down, communicate that to people in our organization? How do we boil that down and eventually communicate that to tenants if we get to that point? It's really complicated, even for people who are looking at it on a daily basis. So I think we need a much better, more comprehensive, bulletproof index that we can point to and say, this is the one thing that's showing you that the indoor air is actually good. Because some of them, there's still issues in there that the index isn't quite weighting appropriately. So I'm just waiting for that. We'll see what happens.
All right, magical filters, magical data. Rishi, do you have anything to add to that?
I like Sarah's idea of the magical filters, especially maybe one that could kind of one size fits all, especially with, in applications with different size HVAC systems and individual PTAC units, something that could be addressed across the board.
Makes sense. Well, hopefully someone on the line is taking notes right now and thinking about this. So as we all know, and some of you mentioned, there's been a huge variance in occupancy. And, even in the last 2 weeks since I thought about these questions, things have changed so much across the United States about pandemic response. So I'm really just curious, what's the biggest thing you learned about your building from that varying occupancy? And how do you think that would affect your future building operations?
I'll jump in.
You unmuted, so you can go first. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things we learned was that we didn't know what our true baseline was. Hotels weren't really designed for 0 to low occupancy. They were designed for 60 to 70% occupancy in mind. And so that was the first thing that we learned was that we didn't know what it was. And so looking back at our 2020 data really was an eye opener for us to see what was our true baseline, because there are certain things that still need to happen at hotels in order to maintain the systems and maintain health and safety. And so going back and looking at the data will be a good experience for us to determine what is that baseline and how can we better reflect that in design standards moving forward.
Yeah, I just build on that. It was, for me, yes, that baseline was fascinating. The fact that a building that's 90% vacant doesn't use 90% less power, but also just the differences in operation. You know, it's not like all of our buildings with the same level of vacancy reduced back the same amount. You know, we had some buildings increase in energy. We had some buildings, you know, have, you know, 5% occupancy, but reduce energy use by 3%. And so we had to then go in and talk to the building engineering team and say, hey, what's going on? And, you know, one example was a building engineer was like, well, the CEO of our tenant company said he just kind of likes working in all the different offices in the building. So he just wanted us to ventilate everything all the time, just in case he came in. You're like, really? Like, maybe we could get a heads up, like, that morning. And then, you know, it was, so we learned that it was, the baseline was fascinating. Buildings are just not meant to ramp down, but also major changes in operational behavior, which were very eye-opening.
I'll add to that, and something I've heard Sarah talk a lot about before too is being surprised that the tenants didn't use more energy than we thought. Like, you know, you look at the buildings, like she was saying, with lower occupancy, and you just assume you're going to see like a 30-40% reduction when tenants leave the building. And there's a lot of literature out there about, you know, tenants and energy use. I'm not saying tenants don't use a significant amount of energy and that we need to partner with them. We do, it's still important, but that's an issue. So what I've learned is that occupancy is king, right? Like, we need to manage our buildings better based on occupancy. And that's why I'm so excited about this tech that I've been talking about, because a lot of it's occupancy driven, and there's so much we can do to radically change the way we operate a building based on who's there, right? Like, why are we ventilating a space where there's 3 people the same way we're ventilating a space when there's 100 people? Like, we just don't need to do that. So it's just our systems don't manage that way right now. So we need to layer in some more of these occupancy sensors and different technologies that can take the right information and make automatic changes to help us learn that. So occupancy is king. We got to watch it. We need to manage our buildings differently based on that data. It's also really good to know who's in the building and where. That's just like a general good data point, and awesome. It's like fun to watch. So it's a good data point to have.
Yeah, I'll just add, you know, in terms of like hard numbers, and this includes some life science stuff, and those guys are essential and they never left. So understand that those guys are mixed in, but, you know, we reduced water usage, which is right about kind of where I thought it would be. It was like about 35%, you know, over the course of 2020. And energy only went down about 13% overall in the whole portfolio. That includes some residential. And again, those guys weren't leaving, and some, you know, in the life science, but 13% should have been more, you know, and that's this baseline issue Rishi was saying, that this, you know, occupancy issue that Jonathan's saying, that's this operational issue that I'm saying, is that water went down because nobody's there to use it, but energy didn't go down in the same way.
Yeah, for us, you know, looking at our data year over year from 2020 to 2019, our energy consumption went down about 20%, and the water also went down about 20% as well. Wasn't as much as we thought it would, but it was a fair amount.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Yeah, it's certainly interesting from the Better Buildings perspective, seeing all the data come in this year and look at that, and, you know, differences between sectors. And it's just really telling of, you know, how that all plays out. I work also with the higher education sector, and they're kind of used to shutting down buildings because of summer break or winter break or whatever it is. And so we've seen big decreases in 2020 because of that, which is, you know, interesting. We never thought it would extrapolate to this. The last question that I have for you before we take some more questions from the audience. So as a reminder for our attendees, you can still submit questions in Slido or vote for the ones that you're most interested in. But, you know, it's very clear that health has been on the mind of everyone, whether you're in building operations or not, for the last year. But looking forward to the long term, is health going to remain a priority with your portfolios? And if so, what do you think is going to be the big focus area for health in the long term?
Can I jump in first on this one? Because I
sure can.
Feel like pretty bullish on this. Like 100% yes, that's a very easy answer. I think like before the pandemic, it was already important, but now it's more important. The way we think about this is we want to have the healthiest building in town. You know, this is the new expectation. This is the new level of service that people are going to expect. And this whole pandemic, like, this is so deep in our psychology. I just don't think we will function and think the same way when we interact with a space. And that's not going to go away, right? So I feel like if you don't have a healthy building, if your business is going to suffer. Like something bad is going to happen, right? You need to elevate to this. And look, at the end of the day, this is all good stuff for people, and our people are the lifeblood of our business. So, if we can, raise to that expectation, right, and deliver that, it's going to be good for them and it's going to be good for their business, which is good for our business. So if you're not prioritizing this, I just don't think you'll be able to compete, especially in really competitive markets. At the tail end of the question, I think indoor air quality is really, for me, the one that is at the top. I think that's one of the most important things to help us understand how healthy a building is. There's a lot to it, and it's still early days. Like, we've been thinking about indoor air quality for a long time, but now we're measuring it in such a different way, and much more detail. It's like when we were looking at utility bills for energy back years ago, and now we have all these really complicated energy management systems where we're getting interval data. Now IAQ is catching up. We're starting to learn what that means, starting to apply some of the learnings and actionable insights from that information. And that's kind of where we're headed. And I think that has to be at the top of a strategy, because it's a really good way to start measuring impact.
Mm-hmm. All right, emphatic answer from Jonathan. So we'll see if our panelists agree. Yeah, Sarah, go for it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that for those of us, and I think Rishi did this and Jonathan did this too, you have to be strategic in your health investments during COVID. And I think the things that we all invested in are things that make sense after COVID. There is always a cold and flu season every year. And I think we're now realizing, a lot of us who have just spent a weird amount of time never getting sick, that like, oh my goodness, I really do get sick when I, walk around and interact with people. I'm touching the surface and, whatever. And so I think buildings that have implemented measures that really help reduce viral transmission, not just COVID, but going forward, are just going to be more valuable. And the data point that I'll use for that is, in the middle of San Francisco, which is a city that has, had a bit of struggles during COVID and wildfires and whatnot. We Kilroy it was a LEED Platinum WELL Gold building, so health was really important to that building. Just sold, it's 750,000 square feet and fully leased, but just sold for $1.1 billion. I think the market really thought that was the health about it, in addition to the sustainability aspects, showed a lot of quality that we're going to have staying power going forward. So absolutely, I totally agree. Health is going to be important in as much as it helps with things outside of COVID. Open stairwells are great, right? People can take the stairs, they get more exercise, great for COVID, great for non-COVID. Those kind of measures are going to be the ones that are just going to stick going forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. I think healthy buildings are here to stay. Healthy operational practices are definitely here to stay as well. For us, health and safety of our guests and our team members is paramount. And we want to make sure that our guests feel comfortable returning back to hotels and traveling again. Because if they're not safe, they're not going to travel or stay with us in any hotel. So I think certain practices are definitely going to stay going to have some longevity and stay for the long run.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, panelists, we are going to move over. We have a lot of wonderful questions coming in from Slido, so we're going to go ahead and move over to that. So if we could bring up the Slido questions here. All right, so our first question, not surprisingly, IAQ focused, and that is, there's little regulation or peer review research for several of the electronic air cleaning devices mentioned today. How do you verify that the device in your buildings are not harming tenants?
Oh.
And if any of our panelists, want to jump in, great, Jonathan, go for it.
Go ahead, Sarah. Go ahead.
Again, we partnered with Underwriters Laboratory for a lot of this to just do testing within our own buildings to make sure that we got the results that we were expecting.
Yep, same here. And I would say it depends on the device. When we're talking about technology like UV, one of the reasons we kind of hitched to that is it's been around since 1920, and there is more research behind it, and it has been used in buildings effectively in the past. So there's a little bit more of a track record there. But you have to be really careful how you use it. Yeah, like UVC 254, like that shouldn't be touching humans, right? Like that needs to stay in your systems if you're installing it, and it needs to have safety measures in place, like automatic shut off if you open the door of the air handling unit. You just need to be careful how you utilize it. But UVC 222 is, proven safe for human contact. So if you're putting that in a space, that should be fine. The other thing that we're doing beyond kind of UL testing is with these real-time sensors, we can measure things like ozone and other things that people say, well, what if you have an ozone problem because of your bipolar or your UV? Like, you can actually now measure that pretty accurately. And we're doing that in every single zone in one of our buildings now actually all of our office buildings now have this as a way to measure this. So there's some data that we can start using to kind of track and verify that too. But it's a learning curve, right? It's all new tech. We need to be careful and learn as we go.
Great. Thank you both. We're going to move on to the next question here, which is, what building improvement measures have the most bang for a buck, such as in IAQ or healthy buildings? This partner is with local government and thinking about how to prioritize or choose a phased approach. Jonathan, you could go ahead and start on this one since Sarah started on the last one, and then, yeah, I can pop back in.
Sure. I mean, this is the basic stuff for me, like good ventilation, right? Good filters at the highest level for indoor air quality, I think are going to drive a lot of value from a health perspective. But then it's like the other stuff that we haven't talked about as much today because there's a lot of focus on the pandemic, but things like daylight, views of nature, access to healthy food, water. I mean, I think about water a lot and how much I don't drink during the day if I'm not actively thinking about drinking water, but also near a water source. It's like the very simple things that is in these certification programs like Fitwel and Well that have a huge amount of value that we just don't think about enough, right? Like having your little indoor air quality sensor on your desk that you can look at when you have a headache, open your window. It all matters. So there's just a couple things I think about, like you physically feel better when you see the outdoors, right? When there's daylight, and it's just a huge value, I think, in a building that's designed with all of that at the core.
Yeah, and I would just build on that and just say, I would just download the Fitwel scorecard and just go through it. It's developed by GSA and CDC together with Center for Active Design. I mean, it started with government buildings, and see what the measures are that aren't in place that are the cheapest to do, but it's easily accessible. It's not hard to understand, and I would just start there and see what's possible. Everything in there has a lot of scientific research saying that it's, there's a health benefit in implementing that measure.
Excellent. Thanks, Sarah. Rishi, anything to add before I move on to my next question? Okay. Sarah, the next question is clearly looking at you, which is, how did you land on the 550 parts per million CO2 target? Thanks.
Harvard. Easy. Harvard told me to. So that's in the cognitive effects study that I mentioned early in my presentation. So if you need to look it up, I can put it in the chat. thecogeffectsstudy.com. 550 parts per million is the level that they landed on for optimum cognitive function, and so that's the standard we use.
I'm so glad
easy enough.
Because I've been kind of wondering, and I haven't gotten to that yet, but it's like there's a lot of gray, I feel like, with the CO2, and a lot of the work out there is like 1250, and I'm like, well, at 1250 I'm already like not feeling great, so is that really acceptable? So that's interesting. I'm gonna have to do a full deep dive on that.
Excellent, and thanks. I see you just put the web address for that in the chat. And I'll also mention that Dr. Joe Allen, who Sarah mentioned at Harvard, was a speaker at last year's Better Building Summit. So once again, you can find some answers on the Better Building Solutions Center. All right, the next question is also directed to Sarah. I can lean forward, it's a little bit small. This person lives in Colorado, and air quality is very poor over the summer with the wildfires, but offices did outdoor air anyway. How do you balance between those two evils, outdoor pollution versus indoor COVID? Well,
I am broadcasting in from Los Angeles, so I know what a wildfire air quality issue looks like, and I know the answer to this question. The sacrifice is energy efficiency. The thing is, the outside air gets filtered through these fantastic air filters we've been talking about. So by the time it gets into the building, it is free of those pollutants, and you can breathe it, and it is healthier, and deals with your particulate matter being dispersed for COVID. It is just a bummer from an energy efficiency standpoint. So the outside air is filtered before it gets inside. So that's the balance. It's just hard on energy. But it
until we get those
magical air filters that I was talking about. But yes, I know
exactly.
It's like not go outside for weeks and weeks at a time because of wildfire. So I feel you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, the next question here is, how do you determine where to end up on the Health Efficiency Balancing Act? So Jonathan, since that was your seesaw graphic, maybe we'll start with you on that.
Yeah, sure. I was just looking back because I think I put a little reply back in the Slido thing. So I was looking back at the question on here too. How do you determine where to end up on that balancing act? So I think it depends on what's happening, right? Like at the time, like during the pandemic, of course, like that changed the way people thought about this, right? For us, like we used a combination of tech and innovation to figure it out. And, granted, right, we're not dealing with wildfires in DC where we're operating. So we have some specific set of variables where we're at. But, we found with a combination, and again, back to the layered holistic approach, right? Like if you can put in the right filters, if you can ventilate, to whatever level you need to, right, to provide that indoor air quality, if you can put in things like UV lights, through all of these things in combination, we found really good balance. And actually what our mechanical engineers told us when we installed UV was like, you don't need to be blasting your building with 100% outdoor air all the time, like everyone else is trying to, because it's actually hurting your air quality because you need that air to pass over your UV at a certain rate, right? So by doing that, we actually found more balance and actually were able to dial back a little bit on energy efficiency and provide even better conditions inside the building with tech. So I just think it really depends on the building, what the realities are, what kind of technology you have. Again, the smart building system helps us balance these things. It helps us correlate all of these things and understand, like, do we need to ventilate more? Is this practice out of line, right? Like we're looking at data to help understand that. So it's not easy. The balancing act is always going to be, right, an engineer's nightmare, but it's possible, and we have more innovation to help us kind of analyze and look at it.
Thanks, Jonathan. Sarah or Rishi, would you like to also weigh in on that?
Go ahead, Rishi, if you want to.
I agree. Definitely, it definitely is a balancing act, and it definitely depends on what the circumstances are. Obviously, during the pandemic, health was paramount and definitely, outweighed some of the sustainability efforts. But I think it definitely fluctuates.
And I would just say our focus is always on trying to find that magical technology that helps us really balance both. We've had some early successes, so it's just a constant looking for, giving up less on the health side to really improve things on the energy side, or giving up not so much energy to improve things on the health side. And that comes through technology as well as knowledge of how to operate buildings.
Great, thanks. So I think for our next question here, I might start with Rishi, since you talked a little bit about communication, at least externally. But this question is, in pursuing health in addition to efficiency, have the internal stakeholders changed or the way you seek internal buy-in?
That's interesting. I think the pandemic has definitely shown us that getting the buy-in involves a lot more stakeholders across the organization, whether it's on the operations side, the legal side, especially when it comes to our franchisees and their hotels. So there's definitely more people involved and a lot more opinions to bring to the table. So it's definitely complicated things, I think, but definitely the results have been better solutions.
I'll add, also put a little response in Slido, but for us, this hasn't really been different. Like we're a relatively small organization, right, in our regional area. So our stakeholders internally are pretty similar usually for this kind of stuff. But again, like health is the number one priority. Like this is the need of the time. Like this is what we need to be responding to. Like buy-in for us has been really strong. And I would venture a guess across, a broad swath of our industry, it's been pretty strong because this is what we need to be doing. It's a must have. And back to my earlier point about, if we're not a healthy building, what happens? Like we suffer. So I think like at the highest levels and throughout the entire organization, people understand, at a high level, these concepts and know that we need to have this. So all around, I think buy-in has been there, and there's been a push to really innovate, a push to research, a push to understand. All of us have kind of like really changed in our roles and the way we think about this stuff. And I think, the buy-in couldn't be stronger, honestly.
Great. Then I think I will move to the next question here since we have time for just one or two more. With adaptive control strategies for equipment operation, how does the building operator know that the building systems are operating normally?
That might be a little aimed at what I talked about, so I'll just
Yes,
start.
I think it's maybe a little bit close to your Nanton experience potentially.
Okay, so the biggest thing I just want to say is like, anytime we install any tech, like it's not just like you put the tech in and you walk away, right? It can't just, not all of this tech does its job on its own. You can't just say it's automated, so it's good, right? Honestly, it just helps us be a little bit better at our jobs, gives us more information, does provide some efficiencies, but there's always going to be people behind this, whether that's constant monitoring of the system, working with that partner to monitor the system, commissioning of that system regularly to watch how it works. And it all comes down to finding a partner who can help you do that. There's going to be, bumps along the way. You're going to, find things that didn't work and you have to fix them. Like the tech is never going to be perfect, right? But we still need it. It's still a good solution. It's never going to replace our people. We still have to watch it. So that's kind of our approach for now as we learn.
Great. Rishi or Sarah, anything before we move to our last question?
Yeah, I can't overemphasize commissioning. It's really, nothing works right on the first try. I'm just going to say that again. Nothing works right on the first try. You just have to get it commissioned, and you have to do measurement and verification to make sure that it's working correctly in and of itself, what it's supposed to be doing, as well as what's happening with the building. So we have a built-in MNV, measurement and verification platform. We've had it for a long time with Gridium. And that's one of the ways that we go and check up on making sure that the building is operating within its own parameters, but also that the technology is having the effect that we are hoping it has.
Can I add one
Great,
more?
thanks, Sarah.
You can start to correlate all of this against like work order tickets and things happening in your building. So you can also really understand how the people feel about what you've done in the building. So there's other tools outside of like just looking at the mechanical and the systems and commissioning, like listen to your people in the building and respond to like what they're feeling.
Okay, great. If we can, we have time maybe for just one more question if our panelists are brief on this last one, which is, how do you mandate and enforce sustainability measures with that many franchises? That might be potentially directed to Rishi. This may apply to those of us who have to deal with stakeholders who can't control well, like tenants or students. So with those leases or franchises, maybe Rishi, we'll start with you.
Sure, and that is a challenge, especially with, so many franchises across the globe. And especially because franchisees are all independently owned and operated, it is a challenge. But we work with our franchisees to partner with them in order to educate them and make them aware of the best practices and the benefits of those, while also working with our operations and brand standards teams to implement certain design standards and operating guidelines so that these sustainability measures are part of their operating procedures and part of their hotel's design. And working with our quality assurance teams, they help to ensure that those franchises are adhering to those standards. But it is a challenge, and it's a continuous education and awareness campaign.
All right, great. Thanks so much, Rishi. With that, I think we're going to pop back over to our conclusion slides, but I will mention that the contact information for our panelists is at the end of this. So if your question was not answered, you can certainly reach out to us. Here are some additional resources related to this topic that you can find on the Better Buildings Solutions Center, which of course has 3,000 other solutions as well, where you can search by location or topic and that sort of thing. And if you love Summit so much and want more better buildings in your life this summer, we highly recommend you check out the Better Buildings Summer Webinar Series. In fact, on June 20th, we have another session that's also a little bit on this topic, so I think that you'll enjoy that one if you've come to this session today. And to do that, you just go to Events and Webinars, the Better Buildings Solutions Center. And finally, just a big thank you again to all of our panelists. This is such a relevant topic, and anything could have changed even just leading up to this. So we really appreciate your flexibility and joining us and all of your insights over what's been a challenging year. And for our attendees, we've just launched a survey in Slido, so we'd love to hear some feedback about this session. Your answers will not be shared with other attendees as it was an earlier Slido poll, so that'll be anonymous. And the Slido survey for that will be open until tomorrow morning. So thank you all so much, and I hope that you'll join us again tomorrow for the last day of the Better Building Summit.